there, if you're watching this video, hopefully it's because you've purchased one of these terrarium toolkits or someone's bought you one as a gift. In this short video, I'm going to explain how to use all the elements in the kit, any extras that you'll need, so you can create your very own terrarium. Inside the box you will find one long paintbrush, one bamboo knitting needle, one long spoon, a large piece of mesh, instruction pamphlet. However, if you are watching this video, chances are you probably won't need that. A live piece of moss, this is cushion moss and it's perfect for terrariums. A bag of black sand, a bag of coloured stones, they're metallic, copper and gold, some charcoal and some sand, and I can promise you that all of these ingredients will make sense by the end of the video. Extras that you're going to need are one pair of scissors, a glass vessel of your choice. I've actually chosen a large pickle jar, some good quality houseplant soil and some fine gravel. Plus you will need a selection of plants. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get our glass vessel and we are going to make sure it's nice and clean. When you're cleaning it, make sure you only use water, a damp cloth. There's no need to put any chemicals in here, and you don't want to put any chemicals in just in case they harm your plants. The first thing we're going to do is make what's called a false bottom. So in the very bottom of the terrarium we're going to put our gravel. When you're popping this in, just be careful in case the stones smash the glass. So I'd recommend just pouring it in gently with your hand. What this is going to do is going to create an area where any extra water can drain away from the plants. So if for any reason there's a bit too much water in your terrarium, the water can drain through into this layer of gravel and not affect your plants, because if the plants are sitting in water, they'll get root rot and then they'll die. And you want to aim to get a really small grit. So what I'm using here is actually grit that you would buy from an aquarium. The great thing about buying it from an aquarium is that it's really clean, because usually this would be used with tropical fish. You can get a similar kind of thing from garden centres, but you may have to give it a wash first because it can be quite muddy. Now, whatever size terrarium you've decided to go for, or glass vessel of your choice, this could be anything from a pickle jar like this, a proper terrarium glassware such as this. It could be a jar which you can find at supermarkets, which I think they usually use to store pasta, but they make a very good terrarium. Whatever size vessel you go for, make sure you get around an inch of gravel in the bottom. So I'm just going to put a couple more handfuls in, and then I'm there. So that should be enough. Now I'm going to use my first tool, which is the bamboo knitting needle, just to level that out on the bottom so we get a good base to start with. Now, step 2, take your piece of mesh and your scissors. You're going to cut the exact size of the terrarium around the mesh. This is going to create a nice layer. It's going to stop any soil falling through into the stones. The plants don't really care, but for aesthetic reasons we like to put a bit of mesh in. It looks a bit nicer. Here's one I made earlier. I'm going to pop that straight in, and then I'm going to use the pointy end of my bamboo needle just to get that in place. So the neater your cut is and the closer it is to the edge of the glass, the neater your terrarium will look at the end. Lovely, and I'm just going to make sure that they're definitely level. So the next step is to put in some soil. I think nowadays you can buy terrarium specific soil, but there's no need to do that. Just a nice quality houseplant soil is fine. Now I'm going to pour a little bit of this in. And then you'll see where I've poured it, the glass has got a little bit dirty. So now I'm going to take my paintbrush to spread this soil just around across the mesh, so a nice even layer across the bottom, and then I'm going to dust down the sides with my paintbrush so we keep it nice and clean. That should be enough. And then again, use the brush just to make sure those edges are nice and clean. Notice in these terrariums here I've got a layer of sand going across the middle. There's no reason for that other than it looks quite nice and it just adds an extra dimension to your terrarium. So in your pack you will find some black sand and some white sand. We're going to start with the black sand. You're going to take your long spoon and pat down the edges of the soil. This is going to be where your layer of sand goes. So we want to make it nice and level the whole way around, nice and smooth. And then again, if there's any extra soil, which there is, just use your brush to dust that away. Now what we're going to do is pop in a layer of the black sand. So what I'm doing is I'm tilting the spoon at an angle and very gently pouring the sand into that corner where the soil meets the glass. So if we pop that in the whole way around, that creates a nice even layer. Now you'll see there's some sand on the glass, so again, use your paintbrush just to clean that off. Now the sand only needs to go around the edges, it doesn't need to go right across the middle because it is literally just for the look of the terrarium. It doesn't actually really add anything to the health of the plants. So just popping it around the edge is enough. Once you feel like it's fairly clean, the next stage is to open the white sand and do exactly the same, creating a very thin layer this time across the top of the black sand. This is what's going to create our line. You can use other materials, but I think sand works well because it's so delicate and fine. You can get a really, really thin line. Pop the spoon at an angle, twist your glassware as you gently knock this against the glass. Again, use your paintbrush just to gently get rid of any extra sand on the side before we then put another layer in. In your kit you should have enough sand to easily do a large sized terrarium such as this one. Because this is a slightly smaller glass, I'm actually going to do 2 layers. So I've done 1 layer of white and 1 layer of black. I'm now going to go back in with the black again and simply put a little bit around the edge. Exactly the same process as I did before, like so, and then I'm going to go back in with the white once more, so I've got a double layer of white. You need to be very, very gentle when you're doing this. You don't want to end up with any big lumps on one side, so try and make it as even as you can. Try and use a sort of similar technique the whole way around so you get it nice and level. And then finally, I'm going to go back in with the black just to seal that white layer, because if you go straight in with soil now you might hit that layer of white and it may disrupt the sand because soil is much coarser than sand. So I'm just going to put another layer of black over the top just to protect that layer. Okay, so the next thing to do is to then carry on filling the terrarium with soil. Just going to put a little bit in, use my knitting needle just to spread that out again, and then I'm going to open my bag of charcoal. Charcoal is a really useful ingredient in terrariums. It has anti-toxic properties that will keep your plants nice and healthy. It helps keep bacteria at bay. Any algae or mould, it'll stop that occurring in the terrarium. So you just need to sprinkle some of that in. A few pinches is fine. Tiny bit more over that side. And then I'm going to carry on putting my soil in. The types of plants that we're going to be putting in this terrarium are not cacti or succulent. If you were making a cacti or succulent terrarium, it would be a different process. So we're going to use regular houseplants. I'm going to talk to you about the types of plants that you can use in a second. I'm just going to finish putting the rest of this soil in. Okay. I'm just going to use my knitting needle to spread that out. Again, you want it nice and level around the top. And then use my spoon just to gently pat that down around the edges. You don't want it too firm. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I feel that's enough soil for these plants. Be sure to measure the height of your plants before you start piling in the soil, just in case you put too much soil in and then there's not enough room for your plants. You want to allow them enough room so they're not touching the glass around the edges, and also a little bit of room to grow. The next step is to start adding in plants and decor. I'm going to start with my piece of moss. Now when you open the bag, it may be a little bit dry. It has been freshly watered when it was packed, but it may have been sitting around for a few days. So just pull it out. And then what you can do is simply get a bowl of water. If you can use rainwater, even better. Soak it in there for a second and then squeeze it out just like you would a sponge. Now this cushion moss is fantastic. It's really hardy, beautifully green and really lovely shape. So I'm going to put that just to the side. So I'm going to pop that in, then I'm going to use my knitting needle to gently pop that into place. The great thing about moss is it doesn't need to be buried into the soil, it's quite happy just sitting on the top of it. But what I would do is just gently give it a prod down so it's nice and firm on top of the soil. Now, continuing with the bamboo knitting needle, you're going to use the fat end just to create a little hole where you're going to want to put your plants. Now you want to aim to get them roughly in the middle. As I said, you don't want them touching the glass. Now I've got two different plants here. They're actually the same species. They're both called Fittonia. Fittonia is a fantastic terrarium plant. It comes in so many different colours. It's really small, it's slow growing, and it's really hard, so it will thrive in this environment. I'm going to start by pulling these apart. Now this on its own is probably going to be a little bit too big for my terrarium. So I'm going to pull it out of the pot and split it into two. Now you see, if you're very gentle, they come apart quite easily. So I've now got one plant there. I could probably split that again, but I'm quite happy with this little one here. I think he'll look really nice in the terrarium. So I'm going to pop him in, and then very gently I'm going to use a combination of the solid end of my paintbrush and the fat end of my knitting needle to gently prod the base of the plant with the roots into the hole that I'd already made. Now what's essential is that you make sure the roots of the plant are not visible above the ground, otherwise they could dry up and kill the plant. Okay, I'm happy with him there. Now I'm going to do exactly the same with this plant. Again, like I said, this is another Fittonia, it's just in a different colour. I'm going to pull one section out. Still feel like he's a little bit big, so I'm going to split him off. That section over here. I'm going to plant this guy slightly at the back because he's a little bit taller. So I'm going to make another hole with my knitting needle. Drop him in. And then again, using a combination of the two tools, I'm going to make sure his roots are in the hole and that he's nice and secure. Making sure I'm covering up those roots with the soil. Okay. Now you may notice that while you've been doing that your moss has gathered some dirt during that time. Simply use your paintbrush to clean around the edges. You can even brush the top of the moss if it's got a little bit of soil on there. And you can do this with the plant's leaves as well. There may be some soil that's got onto those as you're moving them around. Just make sure that it looks nice and clean. Now I'm going to go back in with the end of my knitting needle. Just going to squash all these bits down. Make sure it's nice and flat. And then I'm actually going to add in a little bit more of this gravel that I used at the bottom. Now I'm going to open the final bit of the terrarium kit, which is some coloured stones in copper and gold. And I'm going to place these at the front. So I'm going to drop a few in. I'm just going to use the gold ones of this particular terrarium, and I'll save the copper ones for another time. Then I'm going to use the sharp end of my knitting needle just to pop those in place. Now lastly, I've also collected some larger stones from outside. Again, anyone will have these in their garden or nearby, and I'm going to pop these in. Be very careful when you're putting these in because they are quite big and heavy. They could damage your plants. So place them very carefully at the front, and then using your tools you can pop them in place. I can see I've got a little bit of a gap at the top here, so I'm just going to add a little bit more of this gravel. And an extra gold stone. I'm happy with that. I've put in some gold stones, some lateral stones, a little bit of the gravel that I had left over, the moss, the plants, and everything in the kit has been used. Obviously I've got a few leftovers so I could use them to make another terrarium if I want to. I'm quite happy with this one as it is, so I'm going to seal it up now. Now before I do, I'm going to spray some water into here. I always use rainwater in my sprayers. It's much better for the plants and their health. And once you've done that, you can pop the lid on and your terrarium's complete.